Welcome back to another edition of the Hart2Heart Podcast. And my guest today is Dave Danna. And if you don't follow him on Twitter, I'm telling you, go to Twitter right now, put in Dave Danna and follow him. He is such an inspiring person, and I'm so glad to chat with you today. So Dave, welcome to the show, brother.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So Dave, I found you a couple years ago, maybe it was a year ago. I think Zuby was retweeting you a few times. Zuby's actually been on the show before too. And he's, how I found out about you. And it's just amazing what you're doing. Like you're taking this completely different approach to weight loss than basically almost 99% of people. One of your tweets you had, I think yesterday or the day before, you said, I'm not accepting obesity. I'm terminating it. It's just so inspiring. What I guess, before I kind of get into why you wanted to lose the weight and all this kind of stuff, initially, what was the final breaking point where you said, okay, enough is enough and we're just going to, try to get some weight off here?
Yeah, so absolutely. And thank you for having me. And yeah, Zuby is great. He was one of my earliest and biggest supporters online and just a huge motivator for me, of course. And so my journey really started in 2022. I had taken my first flight since the pandemic. This was probably May or June of 2022. And I needed to ask for a seatbelt extender on the plane. And I didn't know those existed. I never had to use one before. So I had to ask after everyone had already boarded and seated in front of everyone. And so it was probably the most embarrassing public moment of my life and definitely a wake up call. Pre the pandemic, I had been a big guy, but not big enough that I couldn't fit in the seat or needed a seatbelt extender. And so I got home from that work trip and I just moved into a new house. So I unpacked my scale. I jumped on it. I just wanted to see that was sort of a wake up call, but I was still airplane seats are small and nobody's comfortable in them. So I wanted to see what I weighed, right? And I got an error message on the scale. And since I had just moved, I assumed, the movers had broken it. It was, some cheap Chinese thing. I'll order another one. I'll get my weight. We'll go from there. So it comes the next day, thanks to Amazon, of course. And I jump on it again. It's the exact same model and I get the exact same error message. And I'm going to sleep that night and I'm thinking another thing I'd never thought about before, like a seatbelt extender, is I wonder if home scales have a weight limit, right? They can't weigh everything. And so I got up the next morning and I flipped them both over and it said, max weight 400 pounds. And so that's when it hit me that I wasn't, they weren't just breaking on me. I was the problem, not the scale. And so those two things happening maybe within a week of each other was my wake up call. So I think I joined a gym in the next 48 hours and I wasn't really sure what diet I wanted to follow or, when you go online, you're hit with so much, signal to noise ratio and infotainment. It's hard to figure that out, but I knew what hadn't been working. So initially signing up for the gym and then cutting out the fast food and junk food and alcohol and drinking my calories. Those were sort of the first things I did in the first few weeks after getting that error message and needing that seatbelt extender.
Yeah. So there's a lot to unpack there in that story that you told, Dave. One of the first things though that strikes me is, initially you said that you were on the airplane, you had the seatbelt extender, and then basically you said it was, from my understanding, one of the most shameful experiences you had in your life, right?
Yeah. Yes.
And so we talk about shame as this really, really poor and bad thing all the time, and no one should kind of feel shame. Do you regret or how should I phrase this? Are you happy that you felt shame in that moment? Do you feel like shame was kind of a motivator to get you going?
Yeah, that's a tough topic, right? Because people will talk about fat shaming, whether it's good or bad. I'm not an advocate for going around and, let's say, fat shaming, strangers or anything. That's not my style. Having said that, though, it certainly was a negative motivator for me in that moment. Absolutely. I mean, it was, people sometimes ask me, what can you do to get like a family member or a friend to start their journey, to give up some sort of unhealthy habit, to lose weight, whatever they're doing. And it's hard for me to answer, because for me and for a lot of people, I think there had to be that moment for them, whatever it was that sort of kick starts it. And for me, yeah, it was that sense of shame. It was that incredibly embarrassing public moment that served as a negative motivator, then reinforced with a private moment of realizing that I would either have to buy like an industrial scale, right, or figure out another way to even figure out how much I weighed. And so, yeah, in that moment, that embarrassment and that shame absolutely served as a inflection point for me. Yes.
And I think it's indifferent too. Like, I'm just kind of, I don't have any research on this or anything, but like if someone is calling you a name, that's going to be different than if you kind of feel like self-shame. Like,
exactly.
It's not like anyone at the plane, I don't think from your store anyway, was like making fun of you or saying anything to you, just that you felt the shame yourself. And so, we have these feelings for a reason, and so shame, like it must be, passed on in our DNA for some reason. Like it must have some, positive aspect to it. And it seems like you felt that, let's call it self-shame. I don't really know if that's even a thing. And, and then used it for yourself and used it as a very, very strong motivator, it seems.
Absolutely. Yeah. It was huge. I do think that's an important distinction. And it was definitely, I'll remember it for the rest of my life. And, it's easy. Some people, can't exactly pinpoint when they started their journey, right? Because they've tried different diets, they've tried different exercises. And of course, I have done those as well. Anyone who gets up above 400 pounds has. But it's easy for me to think back on when this started, and the successful one so far, 2 years in, because that moment is so striking for me. And it is something I now use myself on the days that I feel a little less motivated, right? I feel, a craving or an urge. So it continues to play an important role in my journey.
And the other thing there, you said, your monologue at the beginning was just so amazing. There's so much to unpack there, but you have that, discipline equals freedom sign there behind you. I can see. Mm-hmm. So, Jocko Willink, and, you kind of took that extreme ownership. Like I heard you say again in that monologue, before at the start of the show that like, it was you, it wasn't the machine. And you said, so that's like extreme ownership. That's like, okay, this is my problem. It's not the machine's problem. The machine can only weigh up to 400 pounds. Of course, it's going to get an error sign. I have to make sure that I, weigh less than 400 pounds so I can get on the machine and get, a proper reading. And so, just talk maybe a little bit about that, how you put all the onus on yourself, and how did you get into that mindset? Were you reading Jocko at the time, or like, how did you kind of get into that mindset?
Yeah, so I was aware of Jocko at the time. I don't think I had read his books or maybe even gotten on his listened to his podcast yet. But I was generally aware of him and Goggins and people like that. But really, it was more practical and sort of real world for me. When I graduated college, I was maybe 210 pounds. And I remember at that point in time thinking, wow, I got to get back under 200, right? When I graduated high school at, 180, that was where I felt good. So I remember graduating undergrad and thinking I needed to lose, 20 or 30 pounds, not 200 or 300, but still feeling that way. And also, my parents are very active, have never had, been overweight or obese. Same with my sister, right? So I don't have this sort of excuse that it might be genetics, or it might be the system, or it might be the culture, right? It was mostly me, right? And it mostly started happening, not mostly, it did start happening for me, aside from like the freshman 15, once I graduated college. So I could point to sort of a specific time in my life, and I could also point to how I grew up and my family and my friends primarily not being overweight or obese. And it was hard, for me as an accountant, like a rational, I like to think of myself as rational, that it probably was me, and all these life factors, added up to that, and sort of bottling it up, and not admitting that to myself, or continuing to lie to myself, or find external factors to blame it on. At that point in time, having had those two experiences, the error on the scale and the seatbelt extender, I was at that point really concerned, like for my life, not just like, oh, I don't look good, I don't feel good, but I was concerned at over 400 pounds. That was a number that was concerning to me, in terms of like reaching the age of 40. And so I just didn't feel that, blaming others or not taking responsibility would work. It was sort of my Hail Mary, like this, I have to change this and I have to do it now. And it's time to ditch, some of those things that I thought or told myself or tried to convince myself of over the last couple of years. Cause again, getting to over 400 pounds, I've been over 300 pounds for years at that point. Right. And that hadn't bothered me, at least not as much as this was bothering me at the time.
And so you had this incredible realization, but then again, just going back to your original kind of monologue at the start, you like right away took action. Within 48 hours, you were at the gym. And so, a lot of people, I think, struggle with that. They realize that they're like, maybe they do have a breaking point like you, maybe not, it's as dramatic. But, how do people, once they feel that particular feeling, like, just take action? And I know that's, probably the most incredibly difficult, question to answer. How do you induce behavior change is actually what I'm asking. But how did you do it, and what advice do you give to others to kind of get into that action? Like 48 hours, it's incredible.
That was one of the most difficult parts, because when you start researching it and you start looking into it, you find just an incredible variety of people who have incredible transformation stories, who have excellent credentials, who cite all sorts of studies, but their advice can be polar opposite online of what you are supposed to do. And so really, what I felt that I needed to do was take steps, do something quickly while I had the motivation, while that moment of clarity was fresh in my mind. And I could figure out some of the details later, but at the moment, I needed to take at least basic steps, to make myself feel like I was doing something, to keep the momentum going, right? Little wins build on themselves and create, I don't know if it's motivation or momentum, but they cause you to want to have more wins. So I thought, if I go out and I join what at the time was the only gym in town, everybody recommends some form of exercise. They might all recommend different stuff, but I know that I should probably be exercising. The same with, nobody is out here recommending you eat fast food and junk food and drink your calories, which is what I was doing every day. So regardless of what my exact diet ends up being, it's not going to have fast food, junk food, and drinking my calories every day as a primary part of it. So I cut those out, and I wanted to join the gym pretty quickly. And then right after that, it was equally as important to go to the gym, right? Because there's a big thing I know people talk about, like the gym business model is that, 1 million people sign up and one guy goes, right? And so I wanted to make sure that I didn't just join up. And so the day after I joined, I went to the gym before work. And I bring this up because I know this can be a hard part for people who get as big or bigger than me. And it still is. For me on some days, that walking into the gym that first morning, over 400 pounds, I had never set foot in a gym before. I didn't know how to use most of the equipment. I didn't think I would fit on some of the machines. And so it was incredibly intimidating. And for that first 6 to 9 months, I basically just walked, and maybe not so fast, on a treadmill for not a very long period of time, because that was basically all I felt comfortable doing. But after I got in the gym, when I left every morning, even though it was still incredibly nerve-wracking and embarrassing and intimidating to walk in, I always felt like a king walking out, even though I maybe just walked on a treadmill for 27 minutes.
That's incredible, though. And I mean, that's the best way to get started. And, walking is a fantastic exercise. It's such a great exercise. And I think the treadmill is amazing. And one of the nice things about, a treadmill, there's lots of nice things about walking outside as well, because you get
Absolutely.
the fresh air outdoors and nature and that kind of thing. But one nice thing about a treadmill too is that you can very, very incrementally increase the speed or increase the incline. And so people might laugh at, okay, yesterday I did 2.5 miles an hour, today I'm doing 2.6. That's an insane increase, right? Like that's like a 4% increase. So, you keep doing that every day. Like obviously, you can only do it for so long before, you get to a speed where you plateau. But, I do think that's like the best place to start for most people is just walking. And just walking and just cutting out the fast food. Like you said, like, what do I know for sure that is wrong? Okay. Maybe there's different, opinions about protein versus carb and macros and all that. But there's no one who says eat McDonald's 3 times a day. There's no one who says, binge on alcohol. There's no one who says drink Coca-Cola. So I think, getting rid of the things that for sure are harming your health, that's definitely step one. And then, step two, like getting into the gym and walking, and that was very brave of you to do that. And if you don't have access to a gym, just start going outside and walking. I think that would be the best. But after you started walking. I mean, I've seen you now post videos. Obviously, there was videos with you and Arnold. You doing some machines together and stuff outdoors. That looked pretty cool. But when did you get into the strength training?
So that would have been almost a year ago exactly. Actually, Arnold, the first contact I had with him, online, was him retweeting and then writing a thread of tips after I put up the very first bench press I'd ever done. And I'm not even sure if there were weights on the bar. I go between 4 and 5 a.m. So I was tired and I think I was over 350 at the time still. And that's the first time I touched something other than a cardio machine at the gym, and the first time that I had any online contact with Arnold. And so really that would have been 9 months into my journey before I even touched that. And it's still only been probably just coming up on a year that I've done anything besides cardio. And now I do try to mix it up. Although I will say, probably keeping it more moderate and focusing more on learning technique and form, those types of things. I know Arnold, when I saw him last week, got on me about my breathing, rather than trying to, max out the weight or do any ego lifting, anything like that. Not that I could do that at Planet Fitness, but
yeah, breathing is definitely something that I've still, am trying to work on too. Sometimes, I breathe through my mouth a little bit.
Yep.
And, mouth breathing, is not good. I'm going to give, I think, the mouth taping a try soon. I've seen some decent.
Yeah, I've seen people do that. Yeah.
Yeah, I have seen some decent evidence on it too. So, so just coming back to your story a little bit. So it's not just the weight loss, you changed your entire life. So, another guy who's been on the show here a couple of times is Ed Lattimore. And so, he's kind of friends with Zuby too.
Yeah. Yep.
And, so it seems like you're familiar with Ed. So, he has this thing in his book, your career, your health, and your relationships is basically your life, and for yourself, we talked a little bit about your health already, and we'll talk a little bit more about that because I do want to delve into some other things like your diet. But, you changed everything. So you changed your career, and then you also changed your relationship. So you just got married. Congratulations on that. You guys seem to be very, very happy together. So congratulations. And then also too, you've been very forthright about I was $60K credit card in debt. And you were. I think you had failed an exam, and then you kind of changed everything around. So did you start making these other changes after you had the seatbelt experience on the plane, or was this something you had initiated before that?
I had started trying to pay off the credit cards a little bit beforehand to sort of mixed results, let's say. But really, it accelerated once I had these sort of clarity moments in 2022 with the seatbelt extender and the error on the scale. And one of the things I had tried and failed at before in terms of weight loss was taking it very much in isolation and trying to do it all myself. And so this time, again, since I really wasn't sure if I would have another chance at it, I wanted to focus on 3 or 4 things at the same time, that being mental health, physical health, financial health, and spiritual health, because I felt like if just focusing on the physical, which is what I had done prior, hadn't worked because one of those other aspects wasn't right. Either my mental health was still bad, or I was stressing over my financial health, or my spiritual health was bad, or my relationships weren't where I wanted them to be. And so I hadn't realized prior how interconnected they were, and I didn't think this attempt would be successful if I tried to do them in isolation or one after another. So I took mostly a similar approach to several of them. And again, once success happened to some extent in one area, it flowed or built into the other area, right? So improving my diet and working on my exercise cut down a lot on the amount I was spending at fast food, on delivery services, at restaurants, trying to teach myself to cook, cut that down as well. Cutting out alcohol, cut out a major monthly expense I had, right? So things meshed up nicely. And so they've all sort of had success at the same time, even if the starting points were a little bit different.
That's amazing. And so with all three of them, did you think one is more difficult than the other? Or do you think they're almost even too difficult to even separate because they were all happened like at the exact same time?
They're hard to separate. And I do think it'd be more difficult if one tried to. I think mental health is the hardest to talk about, especially for men. And I do think that's the most difficult one to show like tangible progress, because I can't show a progress picture or a picture on a scale or a credit card balance that was high and is now low. So it's the hardest to demonstrate, and it's the hardest to speak about. I'm an accountant, so it's easy for me to talk about paying off debt, even though I was bad at it for a long time, right? And so I'm also a numbers guy, right? So I track my weight in Excel, right? So I have data there and I can speak to it. But mental health, it's much more opaque for me. I don't feel like I have as clear a way to communicate it or as clear a way to improve it for myself. But I do think it's very, very critical to my success, and it has improved greatly over the last 20 months.
That's amazing. Yeah. And the other thing too with mental health, compared to say like your weight, is it's not going to fluctuate as much. Like sure, your weight can fluctuate, but like from day to day, you're only going to fluctuate maybe a pound or two, but your mental health, I mean, one bad phone call or one bad moment, or you get into a car accident, or something bad happens, and your mental health can go from like a 10 to a 0. So it is. It's harder to measure like objectively. I mean, it can't really be measured objectively. And we try to with, certain scales and stuff, but, there's some validity to them, but still it's not gonna, tell us the whole picture or the whole story. But that's incredible though, that your mental health has improved as well. And, obviously we know, exercise is a big part of that. And then also too, and for whatever reason, I think some doctors try to shy away from talking about financial health. And, I know that there's many patients that come to me who are depressed, and they're depressed largely because of their, financial situation, and so, again, it's probably so hard for you to kind of like, pick one, but out of like the three, I mean, they've probably all almost equally made your mental health better, meaning like, the weight loss feels amazing, but, paying off debt feels pretty amazing too.
Yeah,
getting
definitely.
married to a new girl feels amazing
Yes.
too. So, it's kind of hard to, separate, the three of them. But again, coming back to those three, like I think focusing on those big three things will improve, mental health. And it's almost, evident to say that, but it seems like those are the big three things that you focused on, and that seems to have, vastly improved your mental health overall.
Absolutely. Yes. And I would say probably the weight loss is the initial one, and the one that is the primary one that then filters out, just for me personally, because it is so measurable, not just with the scale, but also with clothes size, with fitting in everyday life and situations better. It's very measurable, and then it's very real world results, even if they're non-scale. And likewise, that then probably improves your relationships, probably improves your sleep, probably improves your exercising, probably improves your finances, right? And then that all in turn probably improves your mental health. So if I had to prioritize one, I'd probably start there, especially because at my starting size, which again, I don't know, but somewhere over 400 pounds, making those relatively minor, in theory, unscientific, changes, not unscientific as in there's no support for them, but I wasn't reading studies at the time, right? I was just cutting out the fast food and not drinking so many calories. And so they may not be easy to implement in real life, but they're easy in theory. And if you can implement them in real life for a relatively short amount of time at over 400 pounds, that initial weight loss does happen fairly quickly. The 4 weeks into my journey, I weighed myself weekly. And for those 4 weeks, I got an error over and over again every Wednesday when I weighed in. And that was very discouraging. But then eventually, on the 5th week, I got 399.9, which was a huge victory for me, even though it was such a high weight for most people. But again, maybe I was 415, 410, 420, whatever, 4 or 5 weeks earlier. But that initial weight did come down fairly quickly. And even at that size, I would notice, clothes fitting a little bit looser, less bloating in my feet, that type of stuff fairly quickly, as I don't know what it was, that initial water weight, the initial sodium, whatever, the fast food and junk food had been doing to my system cleared out, right? Even then by like 390, I was feeling like I was sleeping better, right? Maybe it was placebo, maybe it wasn't, but the initial impacts of those first changes at such a high weight resulted in early physical non-scale victories that were very motivating.
Yeah. So essentially you got momentum like right away. And then once you have momentum, once you have progress, then it's not easy to keep going, but it's certainly a lot easier. Whereas if the scale doesn't budge, week after week after week, then, it can get a little bit discouraging. But still, I mean, the fact that you had to do it 5 times,
that was rough.
That, that must have been difficult. I mean, the 3rd and 4th week when you saw the error there, and so I'm really, really happy that on that 5th week, you did see the 399 because, I imagine, if it was week 9 or week 10,
I don't know how long it would have
gone. Yeah. So, I'm so happy that happened. So a lot of people though are probably wondering though, okay, so the guy has gone from 400 to 250 pounds, or actually technically we don't even know how much you were because
yes,
right. So,
I take 399.9 as my starting, but right, 4 or 5 weeks earlier, some error message number.
Yeah. So it's pretty wild. So people are probably wondering, what did you eat? And what are you eating now? And so besides cutting out the fast food, like what was your next step?
Yeah. So in September of 2022, I went to the doctor probably for the first time in 10 years. And I'd been insured pretty much the whole time as an accountant. I'd just been avoiding them because I knew they wouldn't say anything good about going to the doctor at 300 or 400 pounds. But at that point in time, I was feeling pretty good. I had lost like a noticeable amount of weight to myself, and I'd been exercising 4 or 5 times a week. Again, just walking on the treadmill. But I was like, okay, like I got up enough nerve to go see the doctor, and they pulled some blood work and did a physical, and the blood work came back and it was all bad. A1C pre-diabetic, glucose above 100, resting heart rate above 110, blood pressure was in stage 1 of whatever that is, hypertension. And I was 30 at the time, and the doctor called me and asked, like, we should have a follow-up, like to discuss, potential medication, lifestyle changes, that type of thing now that we have your blood work back. And that was pretty demoralizing to me because I felt like at that point I've been doing great. And here, every single basically like major thing they looked at was bad, outside of the healthy range. And so one of the things that I wanted to try before taking any medication was that at that point in time, I was still sort of eating everything except fast food, junk food, drinking my calories and alcohol. And so because there was the pre-diabetic A1C and glucose above 100, I cut out pretty much not all the carbs, but I cut out maybe 80% of the carbs and everything that I was still eating that had basically any type of added sugar or most sugar I could at any point. I cut out some of my salt, and I focused on unprocessed food, meats, vegetables. That was basically it. And at that point, I was still eating, some rice and things of that nature. So at that point, that's sort of when low carb started. And it was mainly because I knew I loved meat, and I had tried diets in the past that were like, eat lots of salad and do lots of cardio. And I lost a lot of weight, but it wasn't sustainable for me. And then I gained it all back. So I was like, I can potentially do a low carb, meat heavy diet and help those A1C and glucose numbers out. And I'll probably be cutting back even more on my calories because I will be cutting out, some more carbs and sugar. And so that's what I did, for the 6 months after that. And I went back to the doctor in 2023. I have to get back there this year. And all of the numbers had come back in range. And the doctor was like very weirded out by that, but happy, but in a good way. And so I've basically kept with that generally low carb diet. I don't say it's keto or carnivore or anything like that. I'm not in that range. I still eat more carbs than they would, and more variety of food, and certainly more vegetables and some fruit, but definitely a low carb sort of natural food based diet. And, I would say if I had to point out a weakness at the moment, I don't drink my calories, but I will still drink like a 0 calorie energy drink. If I'm tired on a work day, or if I'm at a restaurant, I will drink a diet soda. So that's something I'm working on and hasn't been successful so far.
I don't think
I've got one right here.
I don't think that's actually too bad. I mean, I know some people, are against carbonated water and that kind of thing. I do follow Lane Norton, and I've seen a lot of the research that he's put out. And I mean, what you're doing, having a diet soda again, some people are going to get upset at me for this, but I don't think that that's, damaging to your health. At the same time though, I am being a little bit hypocritical when I say that, because I drink Zevia. So Zevia is made with stevia. So, I am avoiding it. But if I'm out at like a gas station or something, and, or if I'm out and, someone makes me a mixed drink and it has Diet Coke, like, I'm going to drink it. I don't think it's like that scary, but yeah, I guess I am being a little bit hypocritical because I drink Zevia, for the most part. But still, I don't think, Diet Coke is as bad as what people say it is. I think regular Coke though, or drinking your calories like we've, talked about, definitely, can ruin, your health really, really quickly just by adding on all those extra calories. But that's funny. You were, mentioned your blood work, because I actually wanted to ask you about your blood work, and just not to get too specific too, but did they measure your liver enzymes, and did those go up or down? Do you know if that?
They did not.
Okay. It's because a lot of people with excess body fat, they'll end up with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and so getting your liver enzymes tested, and sometimes even getting a liver ultrasound, something to look at too, to see if there is any fatty liver there. But at the same time too, you can really, really regenerate the liver. Like the liver can be like over 90% like non-functional, and you can like reverse it just by cutting out everything. So there's even like Greek mythology stories about how regenerative the liver is. So
that's very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's definitely good to know. But again, in your story then, it sounds like people will have so many different opinions about diet. And I think the most important thing is to find something that works for you so that you can be consistent with it. Because the most important thing is consistency. By far, if you're someone who can follow, a really solid diet consistently, you're going to have a way better result than someone who, follows an amazing diet inconsistently, so it sounds like exactly what works for you, and you can follow it consistently, and consistency is the ultimate key. And so right now it seems like you're more or less consistently eating, maybe not the exact same thing at the same time every day, but would you say it's pretty similar?
I try to keep it as consistent as I can. So usually it's chicken and a vegetable for lunch. And if I'm going to have red meat, it will be either red meat or seafood with another vegetable, usually larger, for dinner. And then I've started dabbling a little bit more with intermittent fasting. I have sort of mixed feelings and reviews on it. But if I'm going to do like a 16-8 sort of eating window, I'll cut out the breakfast. Because to me, I know people get weird about this too, but I find breakfast kind of annoying. I usually have eggs and just a lot of water early in the morning. But it's the easiest one for me to cut out if I'm going to. And then that general template is very easy for me to follow on the weekdays. And then on the weekends, I might be a little bit more relaxed, but I'm careful when I say that because, again, that doesn't mean junk food or fast food or any or alcohol or, drinking my calories. But that might be when I do have some more carbs. Again, not added sugar from highly processed food, but something like rice, potato, that type of stuff. And that might be when I have a little bit larger portions. That tends to also be, I live here in the deep South, and so everything is fried, everything is massive portions. I'm very good at avoiding it on the weekdays, and it's more of a struggle on the weekends when I have more social events and more family events.
Yeah, I've never been to the South, but I'd love to go down there for some Southern cooking someday. It sounds like you guys have a lot of good meals down there.
Yes, it's great. Not always healthy, but it always tastes good.
But yeah, coming back to again, consistency again is definitely the key. And you have consistency not only in just what you eat, but also you consistently, you weigh yourself the same day every single week, right? It's always these Wednesday weigh-ins. And so that too, I think is important because it kind of keeps you on track and it keeps you, consistent with what your long-term goals are, whereas if you're just kind of wishy-washy about your goals, then it's easier to miss your goals. But it's I need to weigh in every single week. I'm going to hold myself accountable. If the scale goes up, I know then it's my fault. And so is that why you do the weigh-in, or why do you do this weekly weigh-in? Because it's not, uncommon, but it's not necessarily common to do it every week.
Yeah. So I didn't want to be addicted to the scale and weighing myself every day or twice a day when you're just going to see fluctuations and get annoyed. But at the same time, I needed regular data points to make sure I was moving in the right direction. And so I saw someone else online doing a weigh-in Wednesday, and I thought, well, that can probably work with my routine. It gets me, one weigh-in a week, sort of 4 a month. That will be enough to show a trend, right, to make sure I'm going in the right direction. And it will provide consistency in terms of day. And I always do it, in the morning on Wednesday mornings. And just, to go along with that consistency or that routine is what I've tried to build into my diet and also into my exercise. I don't necessarily do the same exercise every day, of course, but I try to wake up at pretty much the same time, go to the gym at pretty much the same time. And then that keeps me a routine every weekday because I then will go to work. And when I started this, I was in grad school in the evenings. And so my Monday through Friday, I just tried to build as much routine and to eliminate as many, decisions, I guess, as I had to do. And that was very important early on when I was struggling more. And then that consistency is now routine, is now habit. And so a lot of it is almost me on autopilot, which is really helpful as I get lower in weight and have to, dial in more, and the weight loss slows, right? And there's, more details I have to focus on.
Okay. I love what you just said, because I was going to ask you about your routine and sleep. I think sleep is so important. And so just before though, maybe we talked about your current routine. How much were you sleeping before? What was your sleep pattern, and what's your sleep schedule like now? Because it's insane. I see you're 4:20 a.m. all the time. So, how did you get into that habit?
So I say now that I've improved my sleep and I'm sleeping better, and that's probably the biggest thing people don't believe, because I'm up at between, 4:15 and 4:30 every morning. So how can I be improved? But, at over 400 pounds, I probably need one of those sleeping machines or a study or whatnot. And I didn't have a set schedule, and I would be binge eating on most weeknights and drinking on most weekend nights right before bed. So I'd be up, 10, 11, 12 on weekdays and at least midnight on weekends. And even when I did crash, I wouldn't be getting good quality sleep because I just eaten, or I just drank, or I just had some level of caffeine. And I was, so large at that point in time, I don't know what type of quality sleep I was getting anyways. Unfortunately, that was in the time when I was mostly avoiding doctors and and figuring out any of those things. So my sleep, pre-2022, for the, say, 2 or 3 years before then, the pandemic years and when everything got really bad, it was terrible. I don't know exactly how bad, but terrible. And there wasn't a routine or any consistency. And so when I started this journey, I really didn't have any desire, honestly, to be up at 4:30 every morning, but I am a morning person. And because I do have a full-time job and I'm an accountant and I was in grad school in the evenings, I didn't know whether I could working out, 4 or 5 times a week, unless I did it at the same time every day. And that would have to be substantially earlier, than everything else in my life. And at the time, a little bit in the weeds, but I was working on a client and I was working on a project for Europe. So they were ahead of us. So it had to be pretty early in the morning if I wanted to sort of get up, get it in, and have time to myself before, the stress of life kicked in. And once that was over, I graduated in May of 23, and I'm not even on that client anymore. It was then a habit and a routine. And so I don't, people ask if I'm going to do it forever, or do I necessarily think it's the best, or they should do it, and certainly not. But at this point in time, for at least the rest of my journey, I still think it's probably the most consistent way that I can get in exercising, because by the time the end of work the day comes around, I'm substantially more tired. And if I try to book it at lunch, I don't know if my boss will double book me, right? Or if I try to say I'll be at the gym at 5:30 or 6, I don't know if I'll still be working then. And then there's all sorts of ways I can rationalize or excuses I can give myself that I don't necessarily have at 4:30 in the morning, because no one is emailing me or pinging me that early. So it was sort of by necessity early on, and now I kind of enjoy it, although no one believes that.
Oh. No, all of the research does indicate that people who work out at the same time every day are the most consistent, and people who work out in the morning at the same time every day seem to have the very best results. So what you're saying is actually definitely supported by the research. And
that's good to know.
Yeah. And I mean, getting up in early in the morning, at 4:20, you say like you feel good. I understand that feeling. I, have done that before. I'm not doing it right now, but, Jocko Willink, that's what he says. He's like, when you're up and there's something about like, I know everyone else is sleeping and I'm working, and it just makes you feel amazing, and then like you walk out of the gym and then you have this post-workout high, and then you're like, and people are still sleeping and I just
Absolutely.
worked out, so he says like it gives me, Jocko, I'm talking, gives me like an advantage over the enemy or something like that. And like, and like for yourself, it's just like, it just gives me an advantage over my own day, over everyone else. Now, like you said, discipline equals freedom. Now I don't have to worry about working out for the rest of the day. It's not on my mind. It's the same thing too when you know exactly what you're going to eat every day. It's like, okay, my lunch is already packed. Like I know exactly what I'm going to be eating. I know exactly what I took out for, supper the night before, and I know that's what I'm going to be cooking when I get home. And so, this discipline equals freedom thing, like it's actually real. And it certainly seems like you've applied it to your life. And it seems like the consistent results that you're getting are because of, the discipline that you've implemented. But also though, too, it's the planning, right? Like you're thinking about it. Like you're like, okay, I know I need to lose weight. Step one is getting rid of, the junk food and excess calories and things that everyone knows, are wrong. What's step two? Step two is like figuring out what's actually going to be sustainable for me consistently long term. And you've done that with your diet. Now it seems like, you've also done it with, this morning routine that you have. Like for some people, they can't fathom getting up at, 4:20 every day. And I'm sure sometimes it's difficult for you too. But, once you do get into that routine, again, you do build that momentum, and it does, make things a little bit easier. And then same thing too with your financial health. Once you get into a routine where, these are my expenses, this is my income, this is what, this is how much money I'm going to have left over at the end of the month. Then you kind of get into a routine where you become consistent. It seems like the consistency is, not just important for not just been important for your exercise and your diet, but also for your sleep routine and for your financial health.
Yes, definitely, for sure. I think that it sits well with me as an accountant. I am a creature of routine, and then also I think it's the way that I can see compounding results, even if they're very minor, because I can compare it to exactly where I was or what I was doing a week ago or a month ago or 6 months ago, because I was largely doing the same things at the same time. And that makes me feel good to be able to have that, like, trackable progress, and in all aspects. Again, not just exercise or weight loss, but also the financial stuff, pretty much everything.
And when you have these days, like when you wake up at 4:20 in the morning and you just don't want to get up, like the people listening who are like, man, I just can't imagine setting my alarm at 4:20 and getting up. Like, what do you say to yourself? What goes on through Dave's head in those moments, and how do you get up and do it?
So early on, I had a lot of those days. I have fewer of them now, but I don't think they ever go away. So certainly probably one day a week, I would have that. And now it's better than when it was 3 or 4 days a week when I first started. But there's definitely days that I don't want to get out of bed that early for sure, or I don't even want to go exercise at all. And usually 2 things help with that. One, I think that the fact that it is habit and routine is part of the reason now that happens a lot less frequently. And the second part is when it actually does happen, that's when I keep in mind a lot of the bigger goals and a lot of where I started. So I'll think about what I want to do with my career, what I want to, at one point it was, getting married, being a husband, and then, one day being a father, having kids, right? Wanting to move up in my career, maybe start my own business, right? Maybe do more stuff in real estate. And so I tend to run through like a checklist in my mind of things that I want to do that I don't feel like I was going to be able to do when I was over 400 pounds and still gaining before 30, or as I was turning 30. And then the second part is, once I run through my little mental checklist, remembering that moment on the plane and getting the first error on the scale, which luckily I have a picture of. So that there's a visual reminder of that one. Those 2 things combined, which is like maybe 20 or 30 seconds, I might snooze, the alarm once or twice, but I'll be out of bed before 5, even on days I don't want to, and I'll be able to maintain pretty much the same routine, maybe 10, 20 minutes late.
That's incredible. And it's really, so important for people to hear that, because we know that it's not easy for people. Like even the people who are able to do it, like, I don't know if like Jocko and, Goggins have talked about before, they probably have, but I'm sure they, don't want to get up sometimes at 4 o'clock or 4:30 and sometimes, but somehow, they get up and do it. And like you said, it does get, easier as you go, but it never completely, goes away. So, amazing that you've been able to, again, do something consistently, but it's also too, again, coming back to like the planning, like you have a plan. So when I feel this way, I am going to think about these things. Whereas like if, you have no plan, when certain emotions come up, then, those emotions may defeat you in the moment, but you have this plan so that you can defeat those emotions and then carry on with your day and take action and get back to your goals, which is, incredible and so inspirational for people.
That's especially true with cravings too, by the way. Having that plan has been one of the big things, because one of the things, I get far fewer food cravings than I used to, but it's one of those things where sometimes I see people online who are like, I found this magic diet or whatever they're promoting in my I never have cravings. I don't have them as much as I did, but I don't think, at least for some of us, they ever go away. But not having the quantity of junk food or fast food in the house, or I don't have DoorDash or Uber Eats installed on my phone anymore, and instead having healthier alternatives that might still have some of those things, right? Like frozen blueberries is one of my go-tos.
Me too.
I mean, like they taste phenomenal. Or like even the fact that I usually keep grilled chicken in the fridge because I make it so much I have leftovers. So if I'm having a late night snack, it's 2 grilled chicken tenders and 2 handfuls of blueberries, and it's nowhere near whatever I used to get delivered for 20 or 30 or 40 bucks worth of fast food.
Yeah. So you're saving a bunch of money and you're also, losing weight at the same time. So again, it's having these like backup plans that you have. Like you have this, this routine where, if this happens, then I'm going to, I'm going to do this instead of that. But one big thing you mentioned there too is, just not having bad food in your house. I don't know if you've read Atomic Habits by James Clear,
yes.
but, yeah, amazing book. And, I always kind of think of some of the things that I read in that book whenever I'm, trying to change habits. And, one of the things that he mentions is, make it difficult, right? And so make it difficult for you to be able to have access to fast food or have access to, junk food. And the ways that you can do that, like you said, you can get it out of your house, that's another way. And then the other way, like you said, is just delete the apps, and it seems like, those are the things that, can improve your ability to not have to utilize willpower, because
absolutely.
if it's not there, then, you're not really going to be thinking about it as much. So you have the blueberries and the grilled chicken. Do you ever eat any like protein bars or anything like that? Is there anything specific that you get into? Like, I'm not like, I don't work for Quest or anything like that, but sometimes I eat some of their bars if I'm, in a jam.
I don't. I just talked to Arnold's people about this. I have not dove into yet the protein powders, the protein bars, supplements, or any of that stuff. It's something that I think will become more important as the weight loss gets harder. And also, as some of the more, I guess, scientific or detailed approach to like exactly what my macros are, where I want to be, as the focus at some point, maybe the end of this year or beginning of next year shifts from weight loss to more muscle mass type of thing. I do think that will be something I get into. But at the moment, not too much. Nope.
Amazing. And so one thing too, I know we talked about it, a little bit at the beginning, but it seems like overall you're sort of like rejecting, I guess, the fat positivity movement. And so have you had any like backlash about that? Like, have people got like upset at you for, because you've essentially, called yourself fat, right? Like it literally says on your Twitter, like, "Hi, I'm Dave, I'm fat." And so have people gotten upset at you about that in any way, or?
Yeah. So I get asked about this pretty regularly because I do make it like a point to sort of just like be open and admit it, because it is true, and then work on it, as opposed to what some of the body positivity or fat acceptance movement is doing. I think in theory, the body positivity movement is a positive, in terms of everyone is created different, everyone is built different. We should celebrate differences, and sort of the 1990s super skinny, swimsuit model is not the body type everyone's going to have, and potentially not even the ideal for some or many. But I think the problem is that has been co-opted or evolved. I don't really know how it happened, right? To some parts of social media, celebrating or promoting obesity or morbid obesity. And that I just don't think that obesity is healthy. And, I tell people I do get some pushback. There are certainly people in my comments who will say I don't need to lose weight, or I look great, or, there's no need for weight loss. And generally I don't engage. Same with, I don't engage in politics or the culture war type stuff. But, I have been asked in interviews, and it is something I talk about in sort of a controlled way, so I don't get into that negative aspect of social media. But my general message is, when I was over 400 pounds and gaining, I didn't feel healthy. And I'm not a doctor, so maybe I was, but I don't think I was. And most doctors seem to say that I probably wasn't. And so I know that I needed to make a change. And as I've made the changes we've been talking about, I have felt more and more healthy and positive, both physically and mentally. So my general response to body positivity and fat acceptance is, for me personally, it didn't apply and it wasn't working at over 400 pounds, yeah. And that is, just a personal experience. But I think it's the case for a lot of people who get to my size, despite what you might see in parts of social media.
Yeah. I mean, you just have a very logical approach to, health is what you're doing. Like it's not necessarily that, you're ignoring the fat positivity movement. It's just that I'm Dave Danna, I'm 400 pounds and I don't want to be 400 pounds anymore.
Yeah, it wasn't working.
I want to be 250 or less. And so I'm just going to focus on, eating healthy and whatever if people want to, say bad things about me, they can. If they want to encourage me, they can, but I'm just going to keep going on my own journey, which is awesome, and very, very inspiring. I know we only have a few minutes left. So one thing I did want to ask about, like when you made all these changes, did your social circle change?
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. I've mentioned this a few times, and it continues to be ever more true. But the people you lose along the way, or the people you pick up along the way, are pretty drastic. And I do think that plays a role, focusing on family, on community, on friends, on relationships, being surrounded by people who aren't necessarily doing the same diet or exercising, right? My wife is not doing the same diet as me, and she certainly has no desire to be up anywhere near as early as I am. But people who are also working on their health, also working on their business, also working on whatever progress they're making in life, has had a positive impact on my mental health, and probably been a subconscious motivator for me. And not to mention, the people who aren't tend to fall away once they see your success. And some of them, I don't necessarily know how to articulate this particularly well, but when I was over 400 pounds, or say in the 300s, the amount of pushback I got from eating fast food, from drinking beer, from eating junk food was minimal. But now that I'm doing a more low carb diet, and I guess that I'm posting about it, and even though I'm down 150 pounds and still losing weight, the amount of pushback or feedback, let's say, I get from people, not only online but in person, substantially higher. Right. So, and substantially more concerned about the potential cholesterol, how much fat, right, my sodium intake and whatnot. But and I'm not saying those aren't issues, right? I'm not a doctor, so some of them certainly could be. But it was almost certainly worse when I was living off of solely DoorDash deliveries and beer, right? Like that, that was where I would have hoped the volume of concern would have been higher as opposed to now. So,
and how much beer were you drinking, Dave?
So that's a good point. I only drank on weekends. So, because I was very focused on, for whatever reason, on not letting my career suffer. So I would binge eat pretty much every night of the week. And then I would drink both weekend days, just beer. I don't know why, to be honest. And I wouldn't drink a ton. I would drink enough that it felt okay for me to order another DoorDash order.
like 6 beer, 10 beer, like.
Yeah, probably like 4 to 6 beers each weekend day. So I go through like a 12-pack a weekend.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, that's, definitely not the optimal amount of alcohol that should be consumed a week, but, 10 to 12 drinks, I mean, it actually used to fit within the Canadian drinking guidelines.
Really?
I think it's like two a day. Now, it wouldn't exactly, because I think they limited it at no more than 3 in a day, but they used to say like 2 per day, 14 a week for men, 9 a week for a woman, something like that. So you would have been, but yeah, I think people now understand, especially with, Andrew Huberman, I guess in particular, understand that basically like the less alcohol, the better, and try to keep it at just a couple drinks.
I'm careful not to say I was an alcoholic, because I'm not necessarily sure I was, or that I really had a huge drinking problem. For me, it was between 4 to 6 beers on Saturday made me relaxed enough that I wouldn't feel bad about ordering more food, and then again on Sunday. But I turned it off Monday through Friday because I was scared it would impact my my career, basically, because I was, just a little bit buzzed at that level of drinking. So I like to include it in my story, and I need to, because it was part of it, and it was my weekends for years, especially during those COVID years when there was fewer social things going on and fewer travel going on, or less travel going on, I should say. But I don't want to make it sound like I was daily drinking or any type of alcoholism necessarily, at least.
Yeah, no, I understand. And it's good to clear that up. People, don't want to necessarily, revert to a story and say that like, oh, not only was he, 400 pounds, he was also an alcoholic. It's like, no, he wasn't the alcoholic. He just had, maybe
I was a weekend drinker.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Which many people are. Dave, so we're running out at a time here, but it's been incredible chatting with you. I think your career, I'm going to make a prediction, is really going to explode in so many ways. I think a lot of people are going to find out about you very, very quickly, and I think your weight loss journey is going to continue to be amazingly successful. And I do see yourself now, maybe getting into the strength training and adding in a little bit more muscle and, getting into the protein powder, maybe even a little bit of creatine and stuff like that sometime soon too, to help, get the reps up and the weights up on the bench press. But can you tell everybody where they can find you online, what your Twitter handle is, and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, well, thank you so much. That's awesome to hear, and I always appreciate it. And it was my pleasure being here. I'm Dave Danna on Twitter, and I'm Dave Danna or David E. Danna on Instagram, Facebook, pretty much everywhere else. I'm the guy posting pictures of me being at Planet Fitness at 5 a.m. most days. That's me.
That's awesome, man. And thank you so much for coming on the show. Thanks
absolutely.
For everything that you're doing. You were an amazing guest. You laid out everything so well and articulate everything so well. I think a lot of people really appreciate this. So thank you so much again, everyone, for listening. And as always, I'll be back again next week.